Welcome to another episode of Learning for Truth and Love. Today, our guest is Dr. Simone Soso, and I am excited for you guys to hear from her and learn from her because she's had an incredible career journey and a very unconventional journey from working in a national zoo as a kid to being in a lab. Um, and I feel like I don't want to give some away, but I feel like you should know up front, to working with just multi-million dollar grants to working with tigers and lions, which is fascinating. But I really want to spend today just talking about your journey, and especially for anyone who might want to explore unconventional STEM paths, which you have. So, Dr. Soso, why don't we begin by you introducing yourself, and just who you are and what you've done?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so I'm from the Washington D.C. area and I'm still here today. I feel like growing up, my parents always made sure that I was exposed to everything I could be, whether it was the arts or going to the zoo because we cut school to hang out. Those were things that my mother always made sure that I had opportunities to enjoy.
Mhm.
And in that, in high school, my freshman year, I found out I had to do community service hours. And so my mother said, "You don't want to just do boring hours where I mean, yeah, do hours at church, sure, but like let's switch it up." So we
Mhm.
were always friends of the National Zoo members
Mhm.
growing up. So we would attend a lot of events and my mom said, "Why don't you try to volunteer at the National Zoo?" So I said,
Nice.
okay. So I started off my summer of my freshman year of high school volunteering at the zoo. And in that opportunity, I got to go behind the scenes, be zoo pathologists, veterinarians, researchers, and find out what it is they did.
Mhm.
And I thought, "Oh, that's so cool that you're a zoo
Wow.
pathologist. Like, you find out what kills zoo animals. Like, this is so neat. Like, what if I do this and I discover some syndrome and I can call it so-so syndrome or like it's I'm doing this research." And my parents were like, "You are crazy, but this is very interesting because my father was a medical doctor and my mother
Mhm.
was a speech pathologist. And to them, they were like, yeah, science, great. But like
Mhm.
this, like animal science, like what is this? Like this is crazy. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to go into animal science when
Huh.
I go to college. And I got to college my freshman year. I thought, to me, growing up in the Washington, D.C. area,
Mhm.
surrounded by educated and influential African Americans.
Mhm.
To me, I thought that was the norm. I
Mm.
didn't realize that wasn't the norm across the country.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until I got to undergrad and I was a Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation program, the
Mhm.
LSM program funded by NSF. And I was a scholar in that program. And I realized how few African Americans were entering into STEM fields.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, I want to do something that impacts that and changes that.
Mm.
So I want to continue to get degrees in research areas, but I want to support the diversity within STEM.
Mhm.
So I was an undergrad. I said, oh man, I'm taking reproductive physiology. This is really interesting. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do a master's in animal health science.
Mhm.
So I went from University of Maryland Eastern Shore, HBCU, to North Carolina A&T to do my master's in animal health science.
Hmm.
And in that area, I was focusing on goat reproduction and how to support and analyze goats during their periparturient period, the period right before they give birth. So I was looking at overall goat health, how their parasite levels that tend to rise during that
Mhm.
period impact their number of offspring and
Wow.
their blood counts and looking at how it impacts the overall maternal health of goats. And I finished that degree, and it was during the recession of 2009. And I was having difficulty finding a position.
Mm.
And one of my friends from North Carolina A&T was doing his PhD in genetics at Iowa State University.
Mhm.
And he calls me and says, go ahead and get another degree. Like, And I was like, "Okay."
Wait, is that because there are so few positions in animal science?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
it could be that, it could be, I mean, who knows if it was necessarily discrimination, but I
Mm,
think when you're looking in this area, when you think of animal science, you think USDA or,
okay.
even the National Zoo. And at that point, I realized though I loved working at the National Zoo, it was honestly the best place ever to work. I mean,
Mhm.
who else gets to walk past cheetahs on their way to their desk? Like,
Or
it's
play
an
with, yeah.
amazing right. It's an amazing place to work. I love it. It's still one of my favorite places on the planet, but it doesn't pay a living wage.
Mm,
And I think people that love animals
mhm.
do that work, but they don't get paid very well for
I was
it.
wondering about that.
No, the pay is not very great.
Yeah,
And
I could see
so
that.
you try to figure out, can I live off of this? Or, do I have to have a roommate all my life?
Yeah.
So, you think about those factors. And I said, okay, well, a master's leading research projects in STEM is not likely. So maybe if I get another degree as well, like that might help me
Mm,
propel my career. And so I decided I'm going to switch gears and major in environmental science because
mhm.
that's the hot topic of the day.
Hmm.
So I'll switch and do that. But as I was applying to Iowa State, my advisor, the person who became my advisor, who I was writing to,
Mhm.
wrote me and said, "Hey, you have this animal science zoo background." Because I worked at the National Zoo for many years
Mhm.
throughout college and post college as an
Mhm.
education program coordinator before I went to graduate school. So, like, I
Mhm.
had many years of experience and connections within the zoo. So he was like, "Okay, you've worked at the zoo. Why don't you work on this project I have with tigers, lions, and snow leopards?"
Mm.
And I was like, "What?" I thought I was switching gears to environmental science. Like, and he was actually a civil engineer. So it was
Hmm.
really odd because people used to always say, like, "You're with a civil engineer? Why is he doing something with those animals?" The reality is the instrumentation in our lab is what glued everybody in our lab together
Huh.
because we were all in different majors, we were all in different areas focusing on different things,
Mhm.
but we used multidimensional gas chromatography, mass spectrometry, olfactometry, so
Yeah.
MV-PCMSO, and that was what connected all of us.
Awesome.
But there were people doing things on biofuels, greenhouse gas emissions,
Mhm.
grapes in vineyards. I mean, all kinds of projects, but we were all
Mhm.
in that same lab.
Now, that lab you mean an undergrad or with the civil engineer after?
The civil engineer for my PhD. So before I even got to Iowa State, I wrote a proposal to go to India to do research with kind of the people that founded semiochemical research with lions and tigers. So
Mm.
the founders of it really.
Mhm.
And so I went to work with them for a few months
Mhm.
and got the opportunity to go out into the field and work at the zoos there too, and the reserves, the animal reserves that they have there for tigers, and collect samples. But I analyzed the majority of my work when I came back because our instrumentation was top notch. Like, we were one of two universities in the country that had
Mhm.
that particular type of instrumentation in our lab.
Wow.
So that was phenomenal to get a chance to work at Iowa State in that particular.
Wow.
And
Now go ahead.
so, yeah, so I, published my data in Nature scientific reports and
Mhm.
different platforms and graduated from there. And then I decided, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do now because I like research, but I found myself doing more advocacy on behalf of minorities within STEM.
Hmm. That's an interesting switch.
Yeah, to the point that my advisor was like, "How many organizations are you on the board of? Like, what are you like, how much time are you focusing on your
Wow.
research in
Mhm.
that area? And I said, okay, well, I realized my calling was not necessarily to be in a lab, but it
Mhm.
was to support those that are.
Mm.
And so I went to kind of a meetup for Black women in STEM.
Mhm.
And these ladies were saying, "Oh, we're AAAS Science and Tech Policy Fellows at the
Mm.
National Science Foundation." And I go,
Mhm.
"What's that?" I've never heard of that. And so I learned about how there were a bunch of people with PhDs that were placed within the federal government, whether they were on the executive branch side, they were on the legislative, there were typically like one or two judicial fellows, but they were placed across the federal government to understand how their STEM backgrounds can help to influence policy
Mm.
and how policy is created.
Mhm.
And I said, okay. So I applied for that and they kind of mentored me and coached me through that process. And I then, the following year, was a AAAS fellow at the National Science Foundation for 2 years.
Mm. Okay.
And I left NSF in 2020. And
Mhm.
as I was leaving, now we're in another situation where you're like, can I find a job because we're now in a pandemic?
Mhm.
And there were a lot of people freezing jobs and not trying to hire at that time. And I spoke with the director at NSF and I said, "Hey, I need a job." And she goes, "Hey, call up the president of an organization called QEM
Oh, right.
and tell him that you need a job." I was forever grateful in that moment. And
Mhm.
I went to work at QEM
Mhm.
and they focus on supporting faculty at minority serving institutions in getting federal grants primarily,
Mhm.
but they have other facets to their work now. They've
Yeah,
expanded.
I remember
And
that.
so I was grateful for that opportunity because I had never even written a grant. Though I was at a granting agency,
Yeah.
I had written like smaller grants, but
Mhm.
never, larger grants like
Yeah.
the ones that compete for NSF.
Mhm.
And that was as a graduate student. And so I was like, okay, now I'm getting an opportunity to be on the other side. And
Mhm.
it was amazing because I got an opportunity to get a few grants while I was at QEM. And then I decided, okay, well, because I still want to continue to learn how to support minority institutions and minority faculty as
Mhm.
well. But it doesn't have to be minority faculty, but as long as you're supporting the diversity within the STEM community, because
Mhm.
it's necessary,
Yeah.
um, to keep us on par with the rest of the world.
Mhm.
Because I want to focus on that, I said, okay, I'm going to leave QEM and go work for another company called MSRDC,
Mhm.
which was the MSI STEM Research and Development Consortium.
Mhm.
So instead of focusing on grants, MSRDC focused on contracts.
Mm.
So it allowed me to learn, okay, well, this is another avenue that a lot of
Mm.
MSIs don't participate in because they may not understand the landscape
Mhm.
of contracting. They
Mm.
also may not have the capacity within their institutions in order to gain contracts.
Mhm.
If your sponsor research office is not capable or equipped to handle the processing of that, it can be challenging.
Mhm.
So MSRDC was kind of there as a middleman to kind of
Mhm.
control and support the payments to the institutions, the technical management of those projects, even understanding, how do you go after your own funding using mechanisms like this.
Mm.
So my job was assistant director of research and workforce development. And so I managed a variety of projects that fell primarily under Department of Energy.
Mm.
So I dealt with a lot of solar projects and advanced manufacturing, things along those lines,
Mhm.
and even industrial decarbonization. And so even though I am not an expert in these things, I have come to know quite a bit about what is going on in these fields.
Yeah.
And
Imagine.
yeah, yeah. And it's very interesting because before I went to work for MSRDC, I
Mhm.
mean, I wouldn't have known really that much about solar energy or, those other areas, but being there, I'm like, wow, these people are really moving the needle to
Uh,
advance these energy efficient practices, these
uh,
cost effective practices that we need within society.
wow. Uh, Well, I imagine a lot of that work is now disrupted.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Well, my organization closes doors this summer
Mm,
officially, and that was due to our cooperative agreement with Department of Defense that allowed us to do the work that we did not being
uh-huh,
renewed.
mm,
That was a large part of it.
yep.
But we had other projects that were selected to be awarded that weren't awarded because
Mhm,
of what is going on in the federal landscape. And I know that there are many other people that are dealing with such things because of what is going on within the
mhm,
federal government. And so, yeah, and so we were forced to close doors.
mhm,
And that's unfortunate because there are many projects that didn't get a chance to complete their work.
mhm,
I hope that they found other avenues in order to get funding, and I'm sure a lot of them probably did because
mhm,
of the relationships the projects had with industry partners
yeah.
and across institutions. And
Mhm,
so, you know, part of my job was to identify partners as well for projects. So,
mm,
of course, I mean, that's anybody who writes grants, I feel, or contracts, you have to deal in strategic partnerships and cross sector, cross area partnerships because how else you're going to get your work done.
yeah.
And so that was a big part of what I did for the last 5 years.
Mhm,
And in this season of change, lately I've been contemplating about what I want to do now.
mhm,
And so I founded the STEM Futures Consulting
mm,
LLC company. And I'm working to support institutions that need grant assistance and grant
mhm,
development, assistance in workforce development,
mhm,
all the things that I have now become an expert in,
right.
you know, in strategic partnerships. And
Mhm,
so I've been doing that I had already been doing that. So even out external to my main job for
mhm,
several years now. And so I just decided, okay, well, I'm going to make an actual company out of this
mhm.
and extend the opportunities to others that are also interested in doing similar consulting work and lending their STEM expertise to institutions or individuals, even companies that need that kind of support.
But I'm guessing you're gonna be moving away a bit from government grants, at least for now?
Yeah, yeah, because I still haven't figured out the best course of action when it comes to federal grant funding
You mean during this time, you don't
during this
necessarily.
time.
Right, right,
During this
right,
time. Yeah. I know a lot of the agencies for the majority of the year were not even granting.
right,
So
true.
yeah, so looking into philanthropic spaces and um
Right. Well, they have to figure out the best course of action is first, right? And then
absolutely.
we will follow suit. I hate to say with my particular because of the work I do, focusing on exploring and using, Black lived experiences and narratives in the curricula. For years, I've been forced to consider looking elsewhere, right? And consider thinking about this. So, because I got to see, individual reactions and perspectives and opposition. It's the type of
Mhm.
work I do. So I confess I'm a couple years ahead of not relying on government grants, even though the solution, which was to form my LLC, was more or less a long shot, right? And more or less something that I continue to look at and develop because of what I do. I never really expect to get that level of support.
Mhm.
But, it's not so uncommon because I do some work with not work, but I've been doing some research looking at scientists' journeys. And I find that quite a few of them, even if they say scientists, they seem to turn their attention to advocacy. I was wondering if you could expand a little bit on that because I mean, do you miss the doing the bench science versus, what you started to do? I'm just curious as to some of what compelled you. I mean, some more depth because we can kind of have a hunch, but, do you miss that and what would you do differently?
I think for me, I had a conversation with a faculty member years ago at
Mhm.
Howard, and he said there takes a certain level of someone being an introvert in
Mm.
order to do well in bench science.
Mm.
And I am an extrovert. You know me quite well. I'm an extrovert, and to me, I don't mind. I love the field work aspect of it. Take
Uh-huh.
me to the jungles of India. Let's go to a zoo. Let's go out and collect samples. Let's do
Uh,
that part. But then when I have to be in a lab
mhm.
and the repetitiveness of bench work, to
Mhm.
me, it's not for me.
Right.
But I can support those that want to, but
Mhm.
yeah, I don't think so. I don't think I would want to return per se.
Now, do you think the introvert versus extrovert portion, well, you said he was at Howard, so hopefully he had that type of camaraderie with whoever, because I always felt like the reason I switched from it was, and at the time I was at Barnard's. I remember staying hours, sometimes 6 or more, just doing organic chem lab, and I was just isolated. It was just, you
Mhm,
know, and I mean, now they've started admitting folks like me in cohorts there so they could be a
mhm,
level of emotional support. But a lot of it,
mhm,
I felt like it was just me. I
mhm,
didn't have, people I felt like I was friends with, people I felt like I had camaraderie with that you can be
mhm.
in the lab and even have a conversation with at a time, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're the only one.
Mhm, mhm.
So for me, it was the isolation that really made you feel alone and like you just did not belong. And I'd like to imagine that somewhere in those labs, there are people who have that level of camaraderie that don't mind the repetition. I mean, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I will say when I was at NSF, I worked with a program called NSF Advance,
Mhm.
which focused on gender equity for faculty. So, generally, institutions were creating policies and programmatic efforts to support equity across faculty in STEM
Mhm.
areas. And so, I remember I was at an institution that will remain nameless,
Mhm.
and I was there, and they had an issue with the recruitment of women faculty as well as minority faculty, and then
Mhm.
even becoming allies to support them when they came there, right?
Right.
So while I was on that in one of the panels for it, someone said, "Yeah, we were gonna hire this person
Mhm.
and she decided not to come here because we were in a rural part of the country and she didn't want to be here. And that was the reason why she didn't come." Now,
Mhm.
unfortunately, because the world of minorities in STEM is so small,
Yep.
I knew exactly the person that he was
Uh-huh.
talking about.
Right.
And I said, I said, the reason why she did not come here is not because this is in a rural part of the country, but because there were schools that hired cohorts of faculty from her institution to come
Mhm.
as a collective minority unit to their school so
Mhm.
that they had a sense of community and camaraderie, even though they may not have necessarily known each other.
Mhm.
She felt like, "Okay, well, at least I'm coming with a group of people, and we will have this connection in this
Right.
new environment." And that is why she chose to go to that other school, and they
Mhm.
had no clue, and they just made up some answer as to why. And so
Oh, that's not you, but go ahead.
but and it is, and I
Yeah.
think that that idea, that mentality around cohorts, I think that is a really good idea. But like
Right.
even being a faculty member, like having that sense of community, and I'm sure of it plays a large role in whether or not people stay. Because of course I
Absolutely.
work with faculty all the time that left academia that work in grant development or manage grants and things of that nature
Mhm.
because they want to support, but they don't necessarily want to be in the classroom
Yeah.
or in the lab.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know the argument people are thinking, right? Have these people in cohorts, often given the perception that because they're in cohorts and because you're making this concerted effort, that it means you don't qualify. And that's often the
Mhm.
argument. But I know I've had conversations, which is why I hinted at it in my perspective paper, but again, it's a perspective paper. I had conversations with people where there were departments, especially think of which ones are the biggest departments that they were, even if they were Black, more qualified Black folks,
Mhm.
they were so used to having it be over 90% white
Mhm.
that they just had a hard time just letting in another Black folk, right? And so that's also why I focus on writing about the pervasive role of symbolism
Mhm.
and the pervasive role that that has on the individual. It's something that we don't really. I don't think I haven't really seen anyone make that connection. I've had this ongoing wrestle with studying and understanding the individual and how it amounts to all of this larger group, institution, symbolic. And when I think institution, I'm not just thinking universities, right? I'm thinking companies, businesses, religion. I'm thinking of anything that has affinity that eventually forms an institution. We haven't quite really dealt with, how all of those individuals sum up. But I've been listening to the individuals for years, and many of us are listening, many of us folks like us, we listen to the individuals and we get to see how it creates the sum that drives what's going on.
When you were talking about the first part about even selection of
Mhm.
faculty,
Yeah.
when I was at NSF, because I dealt with gender equity issues, we would go to a
Mhm.
variety of institutions, and I would be invited to some of their implicit bias trainings.
Mhm.
I don't think it was until I started attending those that I realized, hold on one second, I'm gonna
Sure.
yell at him. So sorry. Yeah, implicit bias trainings. And you learn about how people even craft position descriptions,
Mhm.
making things required that should be optional
Mhm.
and clearly removing candidates from the pool because of those descriptors.
Right. We don't highlight that though. We're highlighting when it supports, you know, having a diverse faculty, but we don't highlight or attend to the fact that those descriptions are purposefully to exclude,
Mhm.
because it's very subtle and you have to, I'm sorry, go ahead and expand on that.
No, no, and I agree. Like they were
Mhm.
trying to say, one of the trains, they were like, don't put that they have to have like publications in nature. They were like, you don't have to have a nature publication.
Mhm.
You know, especially if you're coming from an institution that doesn't focus necessarily on publishing. Like if you're
Mhm.
coming from a large teaching or, let's say an R3 or a school with less emphasis necessarily on research, but more so on the teaching side.
Mhm.
Perhaps you didn't focus as much on your publications and especially top tier publications. Maybe you didn't, or
Right.
maybe you didn't have the funds to apply. But
Mhm.
you don't want to exclude people because of that.
Mhm.
And then they would have like these videos where you would have a panel of people talking and they would have two candidates before themselves, and one's a black woman and one's a white man. And they might have similar qualifications, but they'll say, but she didn't get as much funding as he did, but she has far more publications than he did.
Mhm.
And so they're like sitting there, and the reality is you're selecting one over the other not because of their qualifications, but because you might feel comfortable.
Absolutely. You think one is more valuable. You value one more than the other, and you make your decisions based on what you value.
Mhm.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, no, and I agree.
Mhm.
I agree. I think that people need to truly consider what it is they want in a candidate. And
They have, but go ahead.
It was probably
Oh,
you're right, they had
mhm.
and they
Yeah.
go, "We
They've
don't
truly
want that."
considered it, and so, because they've considered it, they can not only advocate for it, but, manipulate the other side,
Mhm.
especially into believing that you were fair and you thought otherwise. I'm
Mm.
sorry, go ahead, I need to let you
No, no, I 100% agree with what you were saying,
Mhm,
and, albeit I've never been on, a review panel or selection committee for a faculty member. I have attended enough implicit bias trainings to understand how that plays a role
mhm,
in their selection. And I think, it's implicit. Like you don't even think about it. You're doing it without
mhm,
even recognizing that's what you're doing. Some people are, explicit in it, but there are
mhm,
some people that are like, "Oh, I didn't oh, okay, that makes sense. I didn't even think about that because you can see, like, the lights
mhm.
go off, and they go,
Yeah, completely. I mean, I've been on multiple, so I completely understand that.
"Mhm, yeah." I think some universities require it, well, especially the ones that typically have advanced funding. Like, if that was their focus,
Mhm.
they have to, like, the whole university is to do
Require what?
required to do, like, implicit bias trainings if you're gonna serve on a selection committee of any
Oh,
sort.
that's what you mean, okay.
Yeah, and then, but I wonder how much of that will change.
Do you think they're effective?
Many say no.
Okay. Because I guess I've thought of those trainings very differently,
Mhm.
over the years. Part of before I wrote my book, I've done some data collecting, mostly on reactions to those trainings,
Mm.
especially when they're severe, just to really understand what was going on. Those are the kind of things that I looked for when I was doing my research. I was more interested in how people were responding because for me, it said a lot. And so those trainings are very hard to do, I think, especially when you're only attending to the what, right?
Mhm.
Now, occasionally there have been ones where, for me at least, and again, everybody would think of it differently. I can't even say, I'm trying to remember what I've if I've been on any. I'm sure I've been in some. That's how memorable it is. How memorable they are that I don't even remember if I've been on any. But at the end of the day, I just imagine people, the bottom line does matter, right? And what you want does matter. Even though there are some people who want to do well and want to do better. And
Mhm.
I guess those are the ones that matters too. Those who want to do better and be better, I should say is the word, versus those who don't really think there's anything to change.
And, my thing with a lot of faculty that are older faculty that are kind of set in their ways, it's kind of,
Mm.
we appreciate your contribution we appreciate your contribution, but if you're unwilling to change and progress, then maybe it's time that you retire. Like, I think
Mhm.
part of the problem is in a lot of scenarios is that people are unwilling to move and change,
Mhm.
and they also don't wanna retire and make way for new people.
Well, that's the biggest thing I see here,
Mhm.
especially when I compare states, not states, countries. I noticed that we do that a lot less. We don't, especially when people get a certain age, we don't really get out of the way. I wonder what that's about. I wonder if I've been doing a lot of thinking about that recently because I'm trying to remember where it's been coming up. I'm keep wondering if it's just a deep sense of insecurity, if it comes from that place, not wanting to get out of the way. You see it in every industry, right? I'm fascinated by it because especially since we've had so many other countries on the forefront, right? We've been seeing a lot about Canada and a lot about other countries and how people are thinking about leading differently. And I wonder though if it gives us the sense that I guess that's maybe the way to keep things the same, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Make as much progress while trying to seem like we have, right? Because everybody
Mhm.
is all about going in front of the narrative and controlling what it looks like to seem like you're progressing. And then things happen, you're surprised that we haven't, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a big rabbit hole that we can go down. I think, yeah, I feel like when it comes to not wanting change when it comes to equity as a whole. I think there are a lot of people that are still here when things were inequitable and they thought it was okay. And if those people are also still in leadership positions, then it will be the status quo always. But as people are aging, baby boomers are, if you're still working in your baby boom, you definitely need to retire and make room for people that need jobs. And I'm always on my horse about that one because I get
Mhm.
irritated. I'm like, people can't get jobs because you won't retire.
Yeah, and I wonder, is it because sorry. I can't help but wonder, is it because we're not retiring well? Is it greed? We can't have enough? Is it that we're not doing right by our retirees? Or is it greed? Or is it control, wanting to always control things? Or is it just a little bit of all of the above?
I
Because I've been thinking about that.
I think it's a combination of factors. You
Mhm.
have people whose kids are adults but living at home,
Mhm.
people who might have paid for their kids' college or they're still supporting them and because of cost of living. And so they're still working because they can't afford necessarily to retire. I will say that as someone that is a lot younger than a boomer, that when you have people that are, in their 70s and 80s now, they had retirement plans that are far better than the plans
Mhm.
that are offered now. Like
Mhm.
their
Yeah.
pensions. Like a lot of people don't even have pensions now.
Mhm.
They have the ability to live, I think, in a decent lifestyle
Mhm.
as compared to the rest of us that don't necessarily have those things
Right.
because people went away with.
Right. Wow. And I think it'll be worse if depending on how the social security argument goes,
Mm.
um it will get worse because then if you don't have people who can afford to retire, then you're going to have lot of young folks without a job. I would love to get out of the way for them. Question is, can I afford to get out of the way?
Yeah.
Um I'd love to get out of the way without necessarily being too greedy to get out of the way. Just because, when you think about it, the cycle of life, the circle of life, if you want it to be healthy, um, that's also part of it. But I'm wondering if it comes to either the control issue or people do they not know have anything to do when they retire, like
Mhm.
do they not have anything good to do, right? No sense of purpose.
Mhm.
That maybe someone with a sense of purpose might enjoy being retired, whereas somebody they might not want to go home. I mean, there's many situations. You go home might be the first time you actually talk to each other, right?
Right.
Mm.
Yeah, being at home with a spouse that you probably didn't interact with very much before, and now they're there
Mhm.
every day.
Right.
I've seen that happen where people are like, "Yeah, why did I what?" Like, I don't know, maybe I get a part-time job somewhere. I know
Yeah.
people who have done that because
Mhm.
they just didn't wanna be in the house. I mean, part-time, cool, but
Right.
full-time is strange. I know years ago, I did a internship at UC Boulder, and there was a researcher there who was basically a professor emeritus, but he continued to do research on campus, and the man was 90. I was like, "Sir,
Mhm.
can you go
Well,
live life somewhere else? Like, why are you here?" Like, he didn't teach, but he still did his research, and I was just
mhm.
like, "That's crazy to me." Like, you don't wanna go travel or do something? Like,
It's
I
my
know.
hobby. Hey, I would go on forever, I guess, if I had something I like to do, writing or I don't know. Um,
Maybe.
but hopefully, when we think about how we're preparing our young folks and we think about what they need as well, right?
Mhm,
Maybe we don't think about them at all. I don't know. Mm, being around to be a mentor versus being around to in a way that doesn't make space for the future, right? I think we're going to see a lot of that, especially with us living much longer.
mhm.
Not that there's anything wrong with it, right? Like, I'm just trying to think of what am I going to be doing, right? What am I talking about? this. Look at where I took the direction of a conversation.
I think I'm a millennial, and I think millennials, we've lived through a couple different recessions and changes in the job market. I think we are thinking to ourselves, how are we going to make it? Like, we can't retire based on just what's in the 401k. Like, you have to
Mhm.
diversify and invest in other ways so that you can survive. Like, there's no way, like, we could retire at 65
Right.
unless we're coming up with creative avenues to make
Mhm.
money. Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
And whether
Well,
that's yeah.
go
Yeah, but
ahead.
just
Later one?
avoid. No, I was gonna say, like, a lot of people, you have real estate or TikTok sales or whatever it is you might be doing, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing other things.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I've been trying to explore my options. I mean, obviously institutions do want us to get granted.
Mhm.
It's right now it's very uncertain
Mhm.
and you don't even know what you're getting into in terms of yeah, you don't really know you can do all that work and it's just a waste of time.
Right.
Wow. What didn't you say that you want to? You want to leave our listeners with as I went into some directions with this conversation?
Yeah, no, like, to me, I think if there's any way you wanna contact me, connect with me, please utilize LinkedIn. I'm available on that space. Hopefully, by the end of the day, I will have a website up that I will share for my new consulting company. And yeah, please connect. And I'm excited to meet with people and see what they're doing. I love to learn from other people and to see how they're pivoting in this time and the
Mhm.
work that they're doing so I can learn and support you in any way I can.
What would you say your genius is? What's your
Right.
genius spot?
I would say helping people, like listening and being able to come up with a solution
Mm,
for people's problems. And it doesn't matter what kind of problem it is, like we'll find a way, but just listening and
okay.
processing.
What advice would you have for someone who wants to take an unconventional path? Maybe they've been encouraged to enter into STEM. I have met students who said, my parents wanted me to go into STEM, and I don't really know why. Because it's supposed to be, prestigious and great, but they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
What thoughts do you want to leave them with?
I tell people all the time, I do many things to figure out what I want to do next. And the same can be applied to anyone. Like if you're trying to explore where you want to be and what you want to do, have informational interviews with people that have jobs that you think you might want to have. Figure out what their path was to get to where they are. And maybe carve out your own that replicates theirs. I always tell people do internships if you're a student
Mhm.
because there are many internships that I've done and I know other people that have done. You go, oh, yeah, nah, I don't think I want to watch ants doing ant behavior. That's, you know what I mean? You do things and you go, maybe, okay, I don't like this one as much. And so
Mhm.
there's nothing wrong with trying new things and it not working. And you move into something else until you find something that does. I think a lot of times our parents tell us, you get one job, you stay at that one job, you do, that for the
Mhm.
rest of your life. But I think definitely as a millennial, you take the course of do what makes you happy and what can support your life because it is your life that you have to lead. It is your career that you have to be on for many years.
Mhm.
So figure out what makes you happy. And if you don't like it, change to something else. That's my 2
Well, that's definitely the millennial way for sure, right? Openness to exploring as well. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Soso, for joining us today for another episode of Learning for Truth and Love. And you can check out her information in her bio to learn more about what she's talking about within the links. So thank you for joining us. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe for future episodes.